Hey world, my name is Keith and you're very welcome to the Nerdy Keith channel, and you're also very welcome to the 4th episode of Trek Spire. It has been very widely expressed by many persons on the autistic spectrum that we have found particular characters, or in some cases even several characters, to be inspiring and relatable in many different ways. These characters have helped us feel validated, appreciated, represented, and many of us feel empowered due to their existence. So let's look at some of these characters, all the way from the original series all the way down to Disco. Mr. Spock. So Mr. Spock, or rather Commander Spock, was really our very first introduction to the Vulcan race. A species known for their impeccable ability to embrace logic over aggression, but they also suppress their emotions. The interesting thing about Spock, or as he would say, fascinating thing about Spock, is that he is half Vulcan. He is half Vulcan and half human, human from his mother's side. So there's been a lot of times when that human side definitely comes out. Spock has always been a relatable character for a lot of people with AS. Many have claimed that the very fact that Spock represses his emotions almost mirrors what many of those on the Asperger's end of the spectrum experience. In my experience, many have claimed that quite often occurrences in their life, they have felt the need to suppress their true mannerisms in order to blend in with society. I suppose there's also a lot to be said about Vulcan logic, and how those with autism who are more analytically inclined embrace logic as well, along with consistency and routine, of course. In that way, there's a little bit of Spock on us all. Commander Data. So I think it's safe to say that one of the most commonly relatable characters in the entirety of the Star Trek universe has to be Data. Unlike any of the Vulcan characters, actually wants to be more human. He wants to integrate with human society so desperately, but he has so many difficulties in regards to understanding human emotion, human empathy, and the very essence of the entire human experience. And to the best of his abilities, his best friend Geordi tries with all of his might to teach him these things. However, in Data's final moments in Star Trek Nemesis, one could argue that he finally gained his humanity. So it really is no surprise that so many of us with AS really relate to Data and his journey, his experiences. Lieutenant Reginald Barclay. So this character was never a main character, but more of a supporting character. But I think a very underrated supporting character. And that is Lieutenant Reginald Barclay, or Reg for short. There has been much debate whether the character Reg Barclay is autistic or not. For argument's sake, let us just say that Reg Barclay seems to inhabit a lot of characteristics and experiences that a lot of those who are AS tend to experience. Barclay is undoubtedly very intelligent, but he seems to lack drive, ambition, and most importantly, confidence. He also has a lot of anxiety issues, which has led to him to embrace a form of escapism in the form of holodeck programs, which unfortunately resulted in Reg developing holo addiction, that is, the addiction to holodeck programs, to the extent of almost developing somewhat of a dependency on this escapism within the holodecks. These are issues that many on the autistic spectrum have experienced. Mind you, not all of us, but a very significant amount of us have experienced these issues. And this holo addiction, it's really not so different from an addiction to video games. Or at the very least, it could be related to the aspect of special interests, because a lot of persons on the spectrum tend to have special interests. And when we have special interests, we really get very in-depth with these special interests. We want to know all about what exactly we are interested in, especially so that we know the ins and outs of it, that we know everything that there is to know about it. And perhaps that is part of why Reg Barclay became so enthralled and fascinated and got very in-depth in regards to these holodeck programs. But over time, Barclay learned to overcome his difficulties with the aids of others. He learned to overcome his obsession with delving arguably a little bit too deep into his escapism, help with his anxiety and other issues. After all, for those of us who are familiar with Trek history, Reg Barclay is pretty much responsible for giving the starship Voyager the ability to communicate with Starfleet while being so many light years away from the Alpha Quadrant. So in many ways, Reg Barclay is almost a cautionary tale that you should never prejudge a person who is autistic. That one should never assume that there isn't more to them than meets the eye. So he truly is a very underrated character in the sense to how other characters view him and how we have viewed him on screen. Lieutenant Commander Tuvak. So this next character is from my favorite Star Trek series of all time, and he also happens to be my favorite Vulcan of all time, no offense Spock. And that is Mr. Tuvok, or Lieutenant Commander Tuvak. So Tuvok from Star Trek Voyager, unlike Spock, doesn't have a human side as such, because he's fully Vulcan. But just like Spock, there is also that embrace of logic and suppressing the emotions. So like many Vulcans, Tuvok has an extraordinary command of language and pronunciation, which many of us on the autistic spectrum really appreciates. I, for one, love language, and I really appreciate when people pronounce things correctly. And I get a little bit irritated when people pronounce things very, very wrong. Try to be understanding about it, but you get what I'm saying. When Star Trek Voyager originally aired, I really resonated with Tuvok. I just love his character. No offense again to Spock. I love Spock, but let's face it, Tuvok is just a badass Vulcan. He was an amazing Vulcan character. I loved his style of language and the way that he said things. It was like, Captain, sensors are detecting pre-Borg vessels approaching at high warp. Sensors, Captain. I love his pronunciation of sensors. It's amazing. And I also just love Tuvok's matter-of-fact attitude. Well, actually, Captain, that would indeed be a violation of the Prime Directive. 7 of 9. So obviously another Star Trek Voyager character, obviously now Star Trek Picard character. So, like I said, regarding Tuvok, Tuvok was the first character in Voyager who I really resonated with, but when 7 of 9 came along, I really resonated with her character, and her style of language was awesome. You know, Tuvok was so matter-of-fact, but 7 of 9, oh my god, she was so sassy. She was so unbelievably sassy, yet matter-of-fact, because she was so informed, so intelligent. Well, that's, you know, that's Borg efficiency for you, you know? 7 was arguably one of the more complex characters, certainly on Star Trek Voyager, and she did, of course, have a lot of issues to weed through, too. If we were to base a lot of what we see from the flashbacks of her childhood, there's certainly a lot of issues of abandonment, losing her parents to the Borg, and then of course being assimilated herself. So it seems that she spent most of her childhood on the starship Raven, traveling the galaxy with her parents, so she had the experiences of that environment, and then going from that environment to basically being a Borg and having the environment of the collective, and then being severed from the collective to then go back onto another starship under Captain Janeway. So in many senses there's an aspect of abandonment there, to readjusting and adapting to a new environment yet again for the 3rd time in her life. You have to understand, her life as a Borg drone was very structured, very orderly. So when severed from the collective and she goes on Voyager, she feels almost a sense of a lack of structure, a lack of order, which is something, you know, Aspies and people who are autistic experience all the time, because a lot of us, we love our structure and our routine, and it seems that Seven has to deal with that 10 times fold, you know. So there's definitely a link between the two there, for sure. And then of course there's the whole aspect of developing social skills. So late in her life, developing social skills, which is obviously something that people on the autistic spectrum are continuously teaching ourselves and learning to cope with and adapt and so on and so forth. And some of us can manage better than others, and others that find it a little bit more difficult, a little bit more challenging, one could say. So with the help of Janeway and the EMH doctor, they help Seven along with her social skills. They offer counseling and a lot of support, a lot of advice along the way, and they really do help her evolve and adapt and integrate back into society. Seven also experiences a lot of social anxiety, including when she finally gets to have her first dates. Here's a very nice episode where 7 of 9 has her first date with another crewman. And like many of the characters I've mentioned here, 7 is no exception to the rule of having such an amazing command of language, and the style that she speaks is so very eloquent and intelligent. She's got some really amazing lines there, very snippy, very sassy. One of my favorites is, "You are confusing yourself with irrelevant data." So I think I can speak for not just my fellow Aspies, but a lot of my fellow Star Trek fans in saying that the intelligence of 7 of 9 is greatly admired by so many of us. Ensign Sylvia Tilley. So from Star Trek Discovery, we have Ensign Sylvia Tilley. Now, the interesting thing here is when they wrote the character for Tilley, the writers of Star Trek Discovery never intended for her to be portrayed as autistic or a character on AS at all. But a lot of fans who happen to be autistic are very inspired by her character. And the actress who plays Tilley, Mary Wiseman, she admits that the character was never intended for that purpose. But if people are getting that from her character, she finds it very, very touching that they are inspired in any means from this character. But Tilley does have a lot of quirky personality traits that a lot of persons on the autistic spectrum tend to experience and express, we shall say. So whether Tilley is an autistic character or not, her character has certainly left a very positive impression on autistic Trekkies. Tilley has an almost carefree and almost childlike attitude. She wants to do well. She wants to help others. She wants to succeed in Starfleet. She also wants to impress others, and she also wants to feel valued. There are some very, very slight similarities between Tilley and Reg Barclay from Star Trek The Next Generation. Tilley does have some anxiety issues, but they're very slight. It's more of a slight nervousness. You really get to see this in season 2 when she's interacting with Captain Pike, although she probably just has a crush on Captain Pike, and can't say I can really blame her if I'm being honest. But if I had to realistically compare Tilley to another Star Trek character, I think the closest that she comes to is basically the Wesley Crusher of Star Trek Discovery, and she certainly had her quote-unquote "shut up Wesley" moment quite a few times, especially the couple of times when she's interacted with Stamets. It's quite funny. It's quite funny, and it's very well played out. I think she's a great character. I do think that she is a great character. There's a lot of a comedic element to Tilley. She's a very likable character, I think. And look, if there's people on the autistic spectrum who get something positive from her character, that's fantastic. That is amazing. She may not be an autistic character, but if she's inspiring autistic fans, that is certainly not a bad thing. That's an amazing thing. It's a fantastic thing. And the actress who plays her even agrees. So there you have it, everyone. Those are just some of the characters those on the autistic spectrum have found to be inspiring, and have found that they have resonated, at least on some level, with some of these characters. This is by no means a comprehensive list. There's a lot of other characters we could talk about. After all, there's a lot of Star Trek content to consider. There's the original series, the animated series, Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, Enterprise that I've not covered. I haven't covered Deep Space Nine either. There's Star Trek Discovery, there's Star Trek Picard, and there's at least 2 or 3 more seasons in the works. So there's a lot to consider. So I hope you liked this video. I do intend to do more Trek Spire videos, and so until next time, everyone, don't forget, first of all, nerds, we do rule the world because we're amazing and we're awesome. And the other thing is, live long and prosper.